Hello everybody. This is going to be a very important video because in this video we'll be discussing about the blood supply of the abdomen. This might not come to you as a direct question, but this is very important for you to understand the abdomen in depth. So let us begin with our discussion on the blood supply of abdomen. Blood supply of abdomen. Arterial supply. Now, the abdomen and the abdominal contents are basically supplied by the branches of the abdominal outer. The abdominal outer. Now, before entering the abdomen, the outer is known as the descending thoracic outer. It is known as the descending thoracic outer. Now, this is its part in the thorax. Now, as soon as it enters the aortic hiatus, now where is the aortic hiatus located? The aortic hiatus is located on the diaphragm, of course. On the diaphragm, it becomes the abdominal outer. So the descending thoracic outer enters the aortic hiatus in the diaphragm and it becomes the abdominal outer. The abdominal outer. Now, where does this aortic hiatus lie? It lies at the level of 12th thoracic vertebra. This is an important MCQ. So remember this. Now let us understand the abdominal outer and its branches. Now to begin with, we'll make the aortic hiatus here. The aortic hiatus at the level of T12. Okay. Now this is the abdominal outer entering the abdomen, transversing the whole length of it, and finally dividing into common iliacs. This is the abdominal outer. Now let us talk about its branches. To begin with, we'll talk about three ventral unpaired branches. Three ventral unpaired branches, which are in fact the most important branches of the abdominal outer. First, we have the celiac trunk. Second, we have the superior mesenteric artery. And finally, we have the inferior mesenteric artery. So here we have the three ventral unpaired branches, which are in fact the most important branches of the abdominal outer. Now, celiac trunk is known as the artery of foregut. Superior mesenteric artery is known as the artery of midgut, and the inferior mesenteric artery is known as the artery of the hindgut. Now, where does your foregut extend from? Your foregut extends from your esophagus to the second part of the duodenum. Like this is the first part of the duodenum. This is the second part of the duodenum. Now, where up to the second part of the duodenum? The place where the pancreatic ducts and the bile ducts open. That is the place where the common bile duct opens. So, till this point, you have the foregut starting from the esophagus. Starting from the esophagus to the second part of the duodenum to the place where the common bile duct opens. Now, the part distal to this is known as the midgut, and it extends up to the right two-third of the transverse colon. Like if this is the ascending colon and this is the descending colon, this is the transverse colon. The right two-third of the transverse colon is where the midgut extends up to. The part distal to this is known as the hindgut. Now, why are these three branches known as the artery of foregut, midgut, or hindgut? This is because the entire foregut is supplied by the branches of celiac trunk. The entire midgut is supplied by the branches of superior mesentric artery, and the entire hindgut is supplied by the branches of the inferior mesentric artery. So these were the three unpaired branches of the abdominal outer. Now talking about the small minor branches. Now at the level of T12, we have got other branches arising from the abdominal outer. First of all, we have the inferior phrenic artery. Fine. Arising from the abdominal outer, we also have the middle suprarenal artery. Which will of course supply the suprarenal or the adrenal glands. At the level of L1, we have already seen superior mesenteric artery. Also, we have the first lumbar artery on either side, and we also have two very important arteries which are known as the renal arteries on either side, of course. Now, at the level of L2, we have got another important artery which is known as the gonadal artery. That is the testicular artery and the ovarian artery in case of male and female respectively. Now note that the gonadal artery, that is the ovarian artery in case of females, comes from the abdominal outer directly. But the vaginal artery is not a branch from the abdominal outer. It comes, like the vaginal artery is not a direct branch from the abdominal outer. It comes from the internal iliac artery. That is the anterior division of the internal iliac artery, to be precise. Now, at the level of L3, we have got the inferior mesenteric artery along with our third lumbar artery. Here we also have the second lumbar artery at the level of L2. And finally, at the level of L4, that is the fourth lumbar vertebra, is the level at which the abdominal outer bifurcates into common iliac arteries. And also posteriorly, there arises a midline artery which is known as the median sacral artery. Now, after dividing into common iliac artery, it again bifurcates into external iliac artery and internal iliac artery. External iliac artery continues into the thigh as the femoral artery, whereas the internal iliac artery goes into the pelvic cavity to supply the pelvic organs, which we'll learn about later. So here we have a neat diagram of the branches of the abdominal outer. Now let us continue our study of the blood supply of the abdomen by studying the three unpaired ventral branches of the abdominal outer, being the celiac trunk, the superior mesenteric artery, and the inferior mesenteric artery. So we'll begin with the celiac trunk, which is the artery of the foregut. Now the celiac trunk has got three important branches. One is known as the left gastric artery. Second is known as the splenic artery, which we have already talked about in our video of the spleen. And then we have the common hepatic artery. So these are the three important branches of the celiac trunk. Now these arteries further give out branches to supply the organs of the foregut, and the foregut. Now, for example, the splenic artery gives rise to short gastric artery and to the left gastroepiploic artery. The left gastric artery gives rise to esophageal branches which supply the inferior part of the esophagus. The common hepatic artery further divides into two. One is the hepatic artery proper. This artery that you see here is known as the hepatic artery proper, and also the gastroduodenal artery. The gastroduodenal artery further divides into superior pancreaticoduodenal artery and the right gastroepiploic artery. Now, right gastroepiploic artery and the left gastroepiploic artery anastomose with each other. Now, these two arteries supply the greater part of the stomach, basically the greater curvature of the stomach. The short gastric arteries also supply a part of the stomach. The left gastric artery, the right gastric arteries also supply the part of the stomach, and they both anastomose with each other. The hepatic artery proper divides into left and right hepatic arteries, which enter into respective hepatic segments, that is left and right hepatic lobes, and then they supply the individual lobes. So this is another branch from the common hepatic artery. Now this is a branch which may or may not arise from the gastroduodenal artery, like it might be present or might not be present. It is known as the supraduodenal artery of Wilkie, which basically supplies the superior part of the duodenum, that is the junction between the first and the second part. Now let us talk about the superior mesentric artery, which is also known as the artery of the midgut. The superior mesentric artery gives off colic branches. That is, we have the middle colic artery and the right colic artery. It also gives off jejunal and ileal branches, which supply the jejunum and the ileum respectively. It gives off the inferior pancreatico-duodenal artery. Remember, the superior pancreatico-duodenal artery was a branch from the celiac trunk. That is, it was a branch from the gastroduodenal artery, which was in turn a branch of the celiac trunk. Whereas the inferior pancreatico-duodenal artery is a branch of the superior mesenteric artery. This can be framed as a question for your MCQs. It also gives off a branch known as the ileocolic artery, which gives off two divisions, one being the superior division or the superior colic branch and the inferior division of the ileocolic artery. Now the inferior division of the ileocolic artery gives off anterior and posterior cecal arteries, which supply the cecum, as the name suggests, and also gives off a very important artery known as the appendicular artery, which supplies the appendix. So this artery is of great significance when it comes to appendicitis. We'll be discussing about this later. Then we also have got the ileal branch, which supply the terminal part of the ileum, the part of the ileum which opens into the cecum, that is near the cecocolic junction, or the artery of the hindgut. Now this gives off one colic branch, which is known as the left colic artery. Remember, the middle and the right colic arteries were the branches of the superior mesenteric artery. It gives off sigmoidal arteries, and then it gives off the superior rectal artery. Now this is the final part of the video, wherein we will be discussing the branches of the internal iliac artery. The common iliac artery bifurcates into external and internal iliac artery. The external iliac artery continues as the femoral artery into the thigh. Now, the internal iliac artery gives off two branches, two divisions basically, anterior and posterior divisions. It is easy to remember the divisions or the branches of the posterior division because there are only three branches. One being the iliolumbar artery, the lateral sacral artery, and the superior gluteal artery. Now, talking about the anterior divisions of the internal iliac artery, there are a lot of branches. One being the superior vesical artery, the obturator artery, the uterine artery, the vaginal or the inferior vesical artery. Like vaginal artery is found in females and the inferior vesical artery is found in case of males. The word vesicle refers to the urinary bladder. Middle rectal artery and the internal pudendal artery, also the inferior gluteal artery. Remember, the superior gluteal artery was a branch from the inferior mesenteric artery, and the inferior gluteal artery is the branch from the anterior division of the internal iliac artery. The vaginal artery is a branch from the internal iliac artery, whereas the ovarian artery was a direct branch from the abdominal outer. Now the internal pudendal artery again gives off a lot of branches, which are like inferior rectal artery, perineal artery, posterior labial scrotal arteries, artery of the bulb of the penis, dorsal artery of clitoris and penis, deep artery of the clitoris or penis. Now what is marginal artery of Drummond? Now remember, marginal artery of Drummond is a circumferential anastomotic network between the colic branches of the superior mesenteric artery and the inferior mesenteric artery. That is, the middle, the right from the superior mesenteric artery and the left colic artery from the inferior mesenteric artery. Now this circumferential anastomotic network is responsible for supplying blood to the wall of the colon. Now if I have to explain you about the marginal artery of Drummond, for that let me draw the large intestine first. This is the cecum, This is the ascending colon. This is the transverse colon. This is the descending colon. This being the sigmoid colon, the rectum, which continues as the anus. Now, the superior mesentric artery gives rise to the right colic artery, isn't it? So, if this is a right colic artery, we have got an ascending branch and a descending branch. This is the right colic artery. The middle colic artery also arises from the superior mesenteric artery. So, for that, we have a right branch and a left branch. Now, if we have the inferior mesenteric artery here, we have the left colic artery arising from the inferior mesenteric artery. So, it has got an ascending branch and a descending branch, and we also have got the sigmoidal artery, which also has an ascending branch and a descending branch. So, can you appreciate a circumferential anastomotic network, because all these branches are anastomoting with each other. Now, after anastomosis, these branches give out straight vessels like this. These are known as vasa recta. Recta means straight. Recta means straight. Now, and these branches are responsible for supplying the parts of the colon or the large intestine in general. So, this is what is called the marginal artery of Drummond. Now, there exists something known as arc of Riolan. Now, what is this arc of Riolan? So, before understanding this, you should understand the splenic flexure or the left colic flexure is known as the critical point of colon. Critical point of colon. Now, what does this mean? Critical point of colon basically means that this point, that is the splenic flexure, is very prone to ischemia. Now, what is ischemia? Ischemia is reduced blood supply. Reduced blood supply. Now, this happens because the ascending branch of the left colic artery often fails to anastomose with the left branch of the middle colic artery. And since no anastomosis takes place here, there will be no vasa recta arising here, and there will be no blood supply to the splenic flexure, and therefore the splenic flexure will undergo ischemia and will die, isn't it? So therefore, in order to avoid this, there is a direct connection between the main trunk of the middle colic artery. Like this is the main trunk of the middle colic artery. So there is a direct connection between the main trunk of the middle colic artery and the ascending branch of the left colic artery. This is what is called the arc of Riolan. The arc of Riolan. But earlier it was thought the critical point of the colon was at the sigmoid colon. And this was known as the critical point of Sudeck. The critical point of Sudeck.